Turn to John chapter 5, please. Our series is Go and Sin No More. Can you say that with me? Say it. Go and sin no more. Wasn't that easy to say? Say it again. Go and sin no more. Well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Easy to say. Easy to say. A little more difficult maybe to do sometimes. Go and sin no more. John chapter 5, beginning with verse 1. Actually, let's start at verse 2. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. I had opportunity yesterday after the men's retreat closed. They had an opportunity for those who wanted to stay behind to do some skeet shooting. I haven't done that in probably 25 years. I said, "Hey, I'll do that, world." And I was pretty pleased with myself. I hit 4 out of 6 of those clay things. Not good enough to be a sharpshooter, but probably just enough to be dangerous. It reminds me of the 2 hunters who went off to hunt, and they came across this farm. And they thought it'd be good, he's got a lot of animals around here. Maybe we could go up there and see if we could hunt on this farm. And the barn was really dilapidated. The house was really in need of repair. It almost seemed like it was abandoned, but they did see a few chickens running around. There's one goat they saw. And they went up by a well, and they saw this well, and they just sort of wondered, "I wonder how deep that well is." So, well, we need to throw something down there to see how deep it is. And in this yard were some old junk cars and parts laying around. And they saw this old rusty part of a transmission just laying on the ground. So they picked it up and dropped it in the well, and it really went down a good ways. I said, "Boy, that's deep." Then as they turned, they saw this goat charging at them. And just before it got to them, they got out of the way, but the goat just kept going and fell into the well. They thought, "Well, that's kind of strange." Soon after, the farmer came out to see what the commotion was outside and saw these 2 guys, and they went up to him and they asked, would it be all right if we went hunting on your farm here? And he gave them permission, and he said, well, by the way, you see my goat? He said, yeah, that goat charged us like it was going to kill us. And it went into the well. He said, you should have had that goat tied to something. He said, I thought I had it tied to an old transmission. You will follow what you're tied to. You will follow what you're tied to. So what ties do you have is a question to ask. What are you tied to? Because when it goes, you go. What are you tied to? God is into change. In fact, the whole Christian faith is about change. Change from the old man of sin to the new life in Christ. Change of the ways of the world to striving to follow the ways of His kingdom, which is not of this world. This man in John chapter 5, for 38 years, was tied to an old belief system. Now, some of you may have noticed I didn't read a verse 4. Did any of you notice that? Some of your translations won't even have that verse 4 in there. They may have a footnote at the bottom talking about that verse 4. That verse 4 kind of helps explain a little bit more what's going on in the story, but let me tell you a little something about verse 4. It's not found in any of the earliest manuscripts of the Gospel of John. It doesn't even appear until after the 4th century. Some scribe made a note there to try to help us understand, well, what's the significance? Because in verse 7 it says, when the waters are stirred. Well, what's that mean? And a scribe made a little note of a superstition that was a popular superstition of the time, thought to be that an angel of God came down and at a certain time would stir the waters, and the first one in would be healed. And so we have our verse here, that waiting for the moving of the waters, the angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool, stirred up the water, and whoever that was in first after the stirring of the water stepped in, was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. So the scribe makes a note to try to explain this, and scholars have found that over 24 times in manuscripts they have seen scribal notes where they make a note to indicate that this was explaining a superstition of the time, but that this verse may not have been actually written by John. And as I think about this, I think it's probably likely that John knew about superstition, if it was going on at that time, and that maybe he deliberately left it out because he wasn't going to support a superstition, but yet put the focus for his readers on the real healer that was there in this story. That the focus is on Jesus and the healing He provided for this man, and not to acknowledge some superstition. Now, it was very common in the ancient world, even among God's people sometimes, to sometimes believe in some of the pagan superstitions around. Now, we talked about God being a God of change. This man was tied to this old belief system, this superstition that whoever got in those stirred waters first would be healed, and he never did. Can you imagine? For 38 years, hoping that maybe one day you could somehow be the first one in those waters. I wonder if the guy even had any friends that would help him try to be the first one day. We know another story where another invalid had friends who carried him and went on a roof and dug through the roof to get to Jesus. But there's no friends mentioned here. None at all. he was tied to that superstition, it would seem. Now in Proverbs 132, we see something that God says about never changing. It says, "For the waywardness of the naive will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them." That complacent attitude says something like this: let everything stay the way it is, don't change anything. I think that's out of step with God's ways and can hamper the mission of the church. When we get tied to don't want to change. When everything about the faith in Christianity is about change, except its core teachings. We don't change the teachings of Christ. This man was in pretty sad shape before he met Jesus. The Lord touched him, and look at what change occurred. First of all, Jesus touched the man's will. This man was conditioned by 38 years to be spiritually wasted. He was tied to a belief that believed that God was on a first-come, first-served basis. He had the perfect excuse for never getting better. I can never be first. Aren't you glad that God doesn't save us on a first-come, first-served basis? Can you imagine if we had a packed hall here and someone could be healed of a physical ailment, or someone could be healed forever with their spirit, and we'd say it's a one-time offer and it's good for only the first person that gets here? What do you think would be happening? Well, I think it'd be chaos. It'd be stampeding over each other to get here. God's not a God just on a first-come, first-served basis. Jesus asked a very important question to this man. We may think it's sort of a silly question in part. Do you want to be well? Here's a man who's been an invalid for 38 years, waiting near that pool to get in, and he's asking me, do I want to be well? But the question is a valid one. Do you really want to get well? He had two choices. He could remain as he was and retreat back to what he was tied to, or he could trust this stranger who he didn't even know who he was at the time, cut the ties of everything that was holding him back, and try something new. Face-to-face confrontation with Jesus changed his life. A personal, one-on-one encounter with Jesus can change your life as well. The touch of Jesus, it could be perhaps through a friend that he sends to cross your path, and he can touch your life to bring about maybe some healing on the inside or encouragement. Jesus touched that man, and I wonder, is he reaching out to touch you? Is there something he needs to touch you for to bring healing? Maybe something that you've been reluctant to give up, something you've been tied to for a long time. Do you really want to get well? Secondly, Jesus touched the man's witness. I have without a doubt believed that this man, after he was healed, was a walking billboard. Going around telling everybody about being healed. Didn't even know who it was that healed him. Not yet. And people are noticing he's taking up his bed and walk. Of course, they're not really rejoicing that the man's healed. They're arguing over their traditions and customs, and he picked up his bed on the Sabbath, which is wrong because that's considered work. You're not supposed to do that. But he says, the man who healed me said, get it, pick it up and go. And that's what I did. And now they're looking for him, and Jesus finds him eventually. 38 years waiting for a miracle, and now it came. And it came from a direction he wasn't even expecting. Day after day, he was continually reminded for 38 years of how impotent his life was. How weak, how worthless. Suddenly, he had new horizons he could look on. A new lease on life because of this man he doesn't even know who it is. What will make a weak and hopeless man a fearless and tireless witness? That's what we see in this man. I think we even have a clue from the name of this pool, Bethesda. If you look at the terms here in the scriptures, it's from Chesed, which literally means the house of grace. The house of grace. Perhaps we would do better with our witness for Christ if we keep in mind the wonderful healing we've received through His grace. After seeing Jesus again, he was instructed to go and what? Sin no more. He'd already been telling others that he'd been healed, that a man had healed him. Now he's met Jesus again. Now he can tell him who he is, and he's told to go and sin no more. Now he's empowered, he's strengthened to go even further than he had been going. Now he can tell them who Jesus is. Thirdly, Jesus touched this man's weakness. The Bible tells us he was healed. The verb here, the root to the verb is enlarged. He was made well. And put him right in the middle of controversy between him and the critics. What about you? Just because we're spiritually sick, just because we're near a place of healing, doesn't necessarily mean we are made well. He was near the pool. Just because you sit in a pew with a congregation on Sunday doesn't mean you're necessarily spiritually well. You could be close. What's that old saying? Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Our generation has taken many of the activities in the Bible that's identified as sin and relabeled them. Addictions, character flaws, and so forth. We could go on and on. And we feel we have an excuse for disobeying God's instructions. We have an excuse to continue to be tied to our sin. But no sinful habit or past is beyond the touch of the Lord Jesus Christ. God is capable of freeing you even from something you've been tied to for so long. Do you really want to be well? Do you desire to be changed, or do you want nothing new? You want to stay where you are? Do you desire a closer walk with Him, or do you want what you've always had? Do you want Him to make you whole? He can touch your will, He can touch your witness, He can touch your weakness, and He can say to you, get up, take your bed, and walk. Mark Twain once said, because people didn't like changes, the only person who likes change is a wet baby. If you've been in your situation for a long, long time without any change, you may need to stop and ask yourself, stop what you've been doing and do something different. Because it's not going to change if you don't. Look to Jesus. God has provided everything you need to be successful in His eyes. He provides it. He offers it. Wishing won't change your life. Complaining won't change your life. That stuff is like quicksand. The more you hang on to that junk, it's like wallowing in the pit. The deeper you go. The question Jesus is asking, do you really want to be whole? Look what the man said in verses 7 to 9 real quick. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Then Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. At once the man was cured and picked up his mat and walked. He finally came to a point where he had a better offer, and he recognized it, even though he didn't know who Jesus was. Do you really want to receive the blessing God has for you? What was the instruction He gave him when he saw him again? Go and sin no more. And he did. And he went and told others what God has done for him. I think Jesus is making the same instruction today. He wants to bring us grace. He wants us to be released from what we've been tied to maybe for a long time. Bring us release. Bring us freedom in our heart and spirit. And He tells us to go and sin no more. And go rejoicing, telling others. Don't be the goat. Let's sing.